as I'm going through and telling my story and doing stuff, Chuck just looks at me and he says, James, you are the biggest underachiever in the room. And I went, whoa, what? I felt like I'd been smacked in the face with a 2x4.
Have you ever played down to your potential? Well, our guest today, James Woosley, shares how he was underachieving and playing down to his potential and finally had a breakthrough moment. Listen in as we share more.
Welcome to Thriving Beyond, the podcast with stories of thriving through when the obstacles are far from few. Here's your host, whose own story has been featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Vidal Cisneros Jr.
All right, welcome to Thriving Beyond with Vidal Cisneros Jr. I want to welcome a gentleman by the name of James Woosley. Am I saying that last name correct?
You nailed it, man. Woosley.
Awesome. So James Woosley has been on Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas. He's the author of Conquer the Entrepreneur's Kryptonite, Simple Strategic Planning for You. And he's also the author of Your Business Challenge Accepted. Now, along with various professional accolades and certifications, too numerous to name, he's also a globetrotter, big vagabond. He's a business coach and consultant and project manager. And he currently has a podcast named Conquer Your Kryptonite. Welcome, James, to Thriving Beyond. It's a pleasure to have you. How are you?
Thank you, Vidal. It is awesome to be here. It's great to get to know you and hear your story and share my story. And man, I'm just excited to connect with your audience and see if there's something that might spark something that helps them thrive.
Right on. That's what Thriving Beyond is. It's about helping somebody that is so stuck, they don't know what to do. They haven't built up the resilience muscles internally yet. And that is what we're going to talk about today on Thriving Beyond with this phenomenal story from James. So James, if you could give us your short compressed version of what you do in one sentence.
I communicate the potential I see in a way that can be realized.
I love that. Love that. So
I need to unpack it, but that, that was years of work to get down to one sentence.
I can relate, definitely can relate, James. So James, you've traveled a lot and it seems you were a military brat. Is that correct?
Military brat and a military officer myself. Yeah. Okay.
And you've gone through your ups and downs. You're a father, you're a family man, and being away from the family and traveling, being a consultant, I'm sure it does have its trials and tribulations at times, right?
Oh, totally. Totally. I mean, I was on the road 50 weeks a year for about 4 or 5 years. It's brutal, but you get into a rhythm and you make it work. Thankfully, my wife and I have this belief that the belief in marriage and we hold on to each other even through the tough times. So we were able to make it work. And doesn't mean it was easy. Doesn't mean it's always good. And doesn't mean there's not still some issues from those years. But now I work from home and it's a whole lot better.
That's it. That's who the audience is geared towards, James, here. Everybody listening right now, Thriving Beyond, maybe you want to create a podcast. Maybe you want to start chasing that dream. This is what this show is about. So, James, if you could go back to the beginning of you chasing your dream and doing everything you've wanted to do. Now, I know I read some of the fun facts on your website. You had some pretty cool things. You were very ambitious at a young age. Is that correct?
Yeah, I always have been. I mean, people just for whatever reason told me I should run for president. So I'm waiting for, somebody to call and at least, offer me the vice presidential job here this election cycle. But no, I just always had big dreams. I always believed I was capable of doing big things. I had people in my life that would encourage me to do big things. My grandmother particularly, I dedicated the first book to her because she had this. Maybe it's a grandmother thing, right? It's your own parents can't quite do it the same way, but she just had this way of reaching me and encouraging me in ways that nobody else could. And so yeah, I got a little bit of an ego through that, but I kept it in check enough. I didn't go full Donald Trump. And so I balanced it out pretty good. But yeah, I've still got big dreams. I've still got big ambitions. I don't know if it's really the presidency anymore these days, because I mean, really, who wants that job? It'd be a pretty brutal thing on your family and your life. But I'm also, somebody who's if I'm called to serve, I serve. So yeah, I've always had big dreams, big ambitions, and the reality is that if I get down, if I get out for a bit, I don't stay there. I might stay there for a day or two, but after that, it's game on again.
Love it. So if you could paint that picture of the path to one of your biggest storms, how that path looked, what was going on around you at the time, one of the toughest storms that you faced that was so monumental, it was going to create the biggest life shift for you ever. If you could paint that picture and then take us into that storm.
Well, it's a challenge because I don't really see my life that way. And maybe that's just part of who I am. As I look back, I've faced a lot of different challenges. My daughter was born 13 weeks early. She weighed 2 pounds. That was a challenge. First time father, trying to take care of my wife and my daughter, and this whole situation with her being so premature. That was a long-term process. The decision to leave the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 5 years. I expected to be there for 30 years. So it felt like a divorce to me. It felt very emotional and very tough, but it was the right thing to do. But it was very, very difficult. We've got a lot of family health issues that my wife and my son and my daughter face. And so that's ongoing and very difficult. That's probably the most sustainable, difficult thing, because as a man, you want to do something to fix things, right? And you can't. Best you can do is keep the money flowing so that the medical bills don't pile up too bad. And you do what you can to find the right doctors and the right treatments and keep things going. But the biggest, I guess, sharpest impact was a couple of years ago when I lost my job. I'd never been unemployed. I had been working in consulting for, about 13, 14 years after leaving the Air Force. And the contracts dried up. The work I was doing, I was a remote employee, so I wasn't with the home base, and there was no place to put me. So see ya. It wasn't mean. It wasn't ugly or anything like that. It was just a reality of business. And so for about a year, I tried to do it on my own. I tried to get my business full time. I'd always done it part time, and it was tough. It was summertime, so the kids were home. So I'm trying to get into the rhythm. It took me a while. And as I started to finally figure some things out in my work process and my workflow and in getting business in, I got a call from my mentor of 6 or 7 years, and he was starting a new company, and he wanted me to come on board. It's a startup salary, but it was work, and it was awesome work. And so I've now joined his company as a project manager, and we're gonna tackle the world of leather goods in a way that nobody's done before. So it is awesome. I love the work. I don't have to, it's not a job where I have to hide my entrepreneurial efforts, because everybody else is doing entrepreneurial things, it seems like.
Right.
You're framing it in terms of the most difficult, toughest storm. I've faced some storms, but you know what? I've never had the attitude that I am completely broken, lost, I can't do anything. I said before, if I get depressed, if I get down, I can't stay there, a day or two, maybe 3. But after that, it's like, I got to do something. I can't just do nothing. That doesn't solve anything. So I just get up and I start doing it again, and then I'm fine for a while. Maybe that just works for me. Maybe it helps other people. I don't know. That's kind of the way I am.
Definitely, James. I know the audience can relate, because this has kind of been the ongoing theme of a lot of the episodes that we've been doing. Is you said it. You just keep going.
I call it the shallow valley, right? I mean, I see other people go through things, cancer or a loss of life, and I think, man, that's got to be tough. I can't imagine that. My stuff, I lost a job. We struggle with some finances, some things like that. But you just take on the challenge that you're given. But for me, it's the shallow valley. It's a low point, but I can still see the hilltops.
Absolutely.
It's going to take a while to climb out, and I don't really know when it's going to happen because it's shallow, so I can't tell when I start going uphill again to start climbing. But you know what? I can still see the sun. I can still see the mountaintops, and I'm making progress every day. So it's not like the deep dark valley of despair. I don't play with despair very long.
That's good to hear. Absolutely, that's good to hear. Just keep it moving. So, what's the best advice, James, that you've received from a coach or mentor that helped change your entrepreneurial trajectory?
Yeah, in the fall of 2009, I believe, I was at a business conference, small group. It was called Free Agent Academy, and my mentor, Chuck Bowen, who's now my boss, we were in a room, and there's about 30 or 40 of us, and we're all telling our stories and going through things. And it was, a few days, and maybe the second day of the conference. And towards the end of the day, and I'd been, participating, helping. I'm an introvert, but man, I get in those groups and make the connection with people, and I can be pretty outgoing. And I'm a natural coach. I've always been a coach in some form or fashion, teacher. And as I'm going through and telling my story and doing stuff, Chuck just looks at me and he says, "James, you are the biggest underachiever in the room." And I went, "Whoa, what?" I felt like I'd been smacked in the face with a 2x4. And I tell this story in my first book, but it was this moment where I was like, wait a minute, I don't get this. And so 5 minutes later, we're in the dinner line for the buffet, and I'm standing next to Chuck, and I'm like, Chuck, I don't know about an underachiever. Maybe I'm not living up to my potential, and he looks at me and he says, "What's the difference?" And I go, "Whoa." And what hit me so hard and so great was at that point I realized he was not putting me down as an underachiever. He was lifting me up. He was saying, there is so much more potential in you. There is so much more that you can do. I believe in you. And those were the things that lifted me up. A few months later, we're on a cruise together and for another conference. And, he pointed out that I have this strategic ability, which I had kind of always dismissed. Because from the military, strategy is these binders full of war plans that never get used, every possible contingency. But that's the way my brain works. I just never wrote it down and never put it on a binder because I was never interested in those binders not being used. I was interested in strategy that you apply and that you use and you put into action. But he showed me that I have a strategic ability, a gift. And so I pivoted at that point from financial and career coaching to strategic planning. And that's where the book came from. So much stuff has happened since then, about 6 years ago, that it's just an amazing thing. I still consider myself an underachiever because I still believe there's more in me that I have yet to tap into, but I'm pursuing it actively. And that's the cool part. So yeah, that was that key moment, at least in the last 10 years, that just woke me up and said, got to go for it.
Beautiful. That was phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. So you named how shifting from that mindset of being an underachiever to being an overachiever, but yet you're so humble still, James, and you say you haven't achieved enough. So I love the way you think. Now, if you could give our audience a 2 to 3 step formula to best overcome adversity and thrive beyond entrepreneurial adversity or personal adversity, whatever your 2 or 3 step formula would be, what would you say to them?
Well, this is going to be pretty darn simple, and so I don't want people to dismiss it because sometimes bread is pretty darn good, right? It's simple, but it can be really good.
True.
So, step 1: get out of bed. Got to get out of bed in the morning. Not going to do anything if you're just laying in bed. Now, if you can't get out of bed, you're in the hospital bed or something like that. It's a different story. But normal day to day, got to get out of bed. Step 2: do something. Do something positive, do something useful, do something helpful. It doesn't matter what it is, how big it is, if it's moving your business forward or applying for a job or, just doing your job, doing your work, taking care of your kids. Do something that adds value to the world. Okay. It doesn't have to change the world. Just has to be something positive. And then step 3 is just repeat. Do it every day. I'm an optimist. I'm a cynical optimist, though. I can be very critical of things. I can be very skeptical of things. But at the end of the day, I still believe that I can do good things, that I can make a difference, And I believe the same thing for everybody else. You just have to tap into it and want it and pursue it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. If you're in a funk, if you're down, it's very hard. And there, whatever situation you're facing. I mean, it doesn't matter if you stubbed your toe yesterday and it's throbbing when you wake up in the morning, or if you just found out that your wife has cancer. There's something that you can do today that adds value. And so you gotta get up, you gotta go do it, and you gotta repeat it.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. It's you got to go back to the John Wooden fundamental concepts and master them. That's really what it comes down to. So number 1, James says, get out of bed. Number 2, do something, take action. And sometimes we don't want to do this consistently. And that with John Wooden, that was huge, right? Mm-hmm, so if you're familiar with John Wooden and his coaching, he would teach all of his basketball players how to tie their shoes, how to put their shorts on, how to wear their uniform in a certain way. And he started from the bottom to build the foundation of trust and discipline and having integrity. But the most important thing is follow through and execution. So I completely agree with you, James. Very powerful stuff, even though it is so simple that we forget not to do it.
Well, it's easy to just dismiss, but if you kind of get in that habit of looking for something of value to do every day, man, it starts to change things. It's kind of like that attitude of gratitude thing, It's just, you can't not feel good about yourself if you do good for somebody else.
Momentum, right?
Absolutely.
All right, James, we're going to move into Pick One Fast Fun segment. Now, the rule of this game is you just pick one. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, superhero. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man.
Superman.
Travel to Asia, Africa, Europe.
Europe.
Fly on Delta, United, American.
Delta.
Friday night dinner. Fave place to eat. Mexican, Chinese, Italian.
Italian.
All right. Thank you for playing, James. Just something to kind of build off, because I know you travel a lot. And for you, what's the worst flight, I guess, experience that you've had? Just to kind of digress and have some fun here.
Oh, man.
You don't have to name the airline.
No. I started flying right before September 11th happened. That's when I got out of the Air Force in April of 2001. And I started consulting, and I was traveling, like I said, every week up to Maryland somewhere. And so I was about an hour south of the Pentagon on September 11th. So I kind of got stuck there. So I kind of saw all the changes. I remember whenever, people could go to the back of the airport with you and didn't have to take your shoes off, and, you carry a bottle of water with you. But the probably the worst, and it really wasn't that bad, was one time I was traveling up to Maryland, and the major snowstorm hit. And so I was supposed to fly into, I think it was BWI in Baltimore, and we got redirected to New York. I think it was LaGuardia, but I can't remember if it was JFK or LaGuardia. And so we were flying out over the ocean. We were waiting, and finally they landed us in New York. It's midnight. I've got an 8:00 presentation in the morning that I've got to be a part of, because I'm running the slides for it so that I can learn the process and eventually, lead the process. And so I rented a car. I rented a bright yellow Mustang, rear wheel drive. Luckily, I grew up in Nebraska, so I know how to drive in snow. It wasn't snowing in New York. And I started driving, and drove about halfway through New Jersey, and the snowflakes started, continued on, got to Baltimore, got to DC, headed south. It was about a 7-hour drive, pulled in just in time for work. And I was pretty much a zombie by the end of the day. I remember standing in the back of the room, because I'm just supposed to learn these slides so that I can present them later. And I'm just wasted. So I get off work. I go back to I had a corporate apartment at the time, and now I had to stay up. I had to stay up another couple of hours just so that I could have a regular sleep schedule, or I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and start it all over again. So yeah, it was a tough trip, but man, I've had friends that had, landing gear fail and run off the runway, and
man,
some crazy stuff has happened through the years. Once you meet consultants, they have some pretty amazing stories. Not always safe for work stories. Right. But it's definitely an interesting world, and thankfully I've never had any major flight issues. So,
thank you for sharing that. So to close out, James, what's the best way to connect with you and reach you?
Well, right now, the best thing is just to go to woosleycoaching.com. There you got all my contact info and can reach me. I do a lot of different things, and I'm kind of shifting my social presence, and I'll probably be launching a new website soon to consolidate. I've got so many different lines of business. I do coaching and publishing and some technical work and consulting. So I'll probably bring everything under a jameswoosley.com brand pretty soon. But woosleycoaching.com, that's the easiest one place to go and just reach out to me about anything. I'm happy to chat with folks and help them, whether it's business coaching, you need some help with strategy, that kind of thing, or even just general life. If sometimes it's a thing where if you just connect with somebody, then you need to engage in that. And I'm happy to talk to anybody in your audience that just wants to chat for half an hour and see, if there's a connection there. I remember back before I met Chuck that he had been advertising and for these free consulting sessions and stuff. And I knew if I contacted him, there'd be a pitch at the end and I wouldn't have the money for it and all this stuff. I regret so much not doing that, because Chuck has added so much to my life and he's become one of my best friends and mentors and my boss. And, there's so many dynamics to our relationship, and it's just an amazing thing. But I regret hesitating to reach out to him because I felt that connection even before we met for the first time. So, if something resonates here, somebody wants to chat, I'm happy to do it. Just, go to the website, schedule a time, reach out, and we'll see what happens. I'm not saying there's going to be a big pitch or not, but if there's a connection for both of us, I'd like to explore that and see if we can't help each other. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Might become best friends out of it. So I could always use another best friend.
I hear you. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because you have to put skin in the game in order to get results. That's what I learned 2 years ago. And I did the same thing. I hesitated for many years until I finally hired my first success coach. And that changed my life completely. So I'm so glad you brought that up. So everything will be in the show notes to connect with James. James, it's been a pleasure. So glad to have you on. All right, everybody, thank you for listening. As always, keep going, keep growing, and keep on thriving, because it's way better than just surviving.
Thanks for listening. For recaps and to claim bonus gifts, head over to thrivingbeyondpodcast.com. Keep thriving.